All right, so this scene is done, and our next scene is going to be this one. So basically, the way I found inspiration for this scene was I simply went to Pinterest, and I searched for a cave. Now, a lot of caves did come up, and basically, I wanted to create a cave with sort of like a fantasy style, sort of like a Lord of Rings style. And I this one was this was my inspiration, and I looked at a lot of these, and then I decided that I'm gonna make this thing, but in a more fantasy style, right? So that's why we're gonna be doing that right now. And also, I did make an animation of this as well, which I'm gonna be showing you how to do that as well. So that's on my Instagram. I'm just gonna go to my Instagram. All right, so here's the animation, and it did have some music as well, but I'm not going to play that right now. So you're going to see we're going inside the cave, and basically we've added assets to the inside of the cave as well, and then there's a man dancing at the end. So we're going to be doing all this inside of this video. So yeah, without any further ado, let's start. So what I'm going to do firstly is that I'm going to be creating a new level file, new level, and empty level. We're going to be starting from scratch, and just press Control S to save the level, and I'm just going to name it cave um dancing man, I guess. Actually, I'm just gonna rename this. Where to go? I'm just gonna add SS to the name so that I know that it was for a Skillshare class. And just press save all, and let's begin with the project. So first I'm just gonna go to Window, Environment Light Mixer, and as we've done before, I'm just gonna create the basic lighting. Right, that's done. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be firstly blocking out the whole scene, right? And so for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding a cube firstly for the ground. I'm just going to be moving it down. I'm just going to turn on snapping for now. I did turn it off before because in some cases it's a little annoying, but in others it is very helpful as well. So I'm just going to be scaling it up like that. And we're going to be taking reference from this. So basically this is our ground, and then we're going to be blocking out the cave next. So I think that should be good. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be duplicating this. Actually, I'm not going to duplicate that because it's way too big. Instead, what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to create another cube. And I'm just going to go here so that we can, the light is basically facing the cube from this way, so that we can easily block out the scene. I think that should be good. Let me just duplicate this like that. And let me just reduce the camera speed to 2. I think that should be good. I'm going to be duplicating both of these. Oops. I'm going to be duplicating both of these like that. And then let me just add one right here and one right here as well. We can probably move these up. Something like that. So that's basically our cave, the basic outline of our cave. Actually, I'm going to move these two a little here and these little there as well. We can obviously fill these, we're obviously going to be filling these with assets later on, so it doesn't really matter if you're not super accurate with this. You can just create a basic shape of what you want, and then the rest we're going to be doing later on. And let me just duplicate this right here. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be scaling it up like this, and I'm going to be moving it right here, so that we're basically covering up the whole wall. And I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to be placing it right here as well. And this top part, I can just duplicate these. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting the assets in the middle. Oops, I'm not going to be selecting the bigger wall right there. Let me just increase the camera speed. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting these assets right here, these cubes, and I'm going to be duplicating them. But for that, I'm going to go to the top view first, and I can just duplicate them like that. Or instead, what I can do is that I can simply scale them up in the x-axis. Oops, like that. If I just do that, you're going to see that if I move it back, we have a whole long cave. And now what I'm going to do is that another thing which I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be, if I just undo, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be duplicating this like that. And now I'm just going to be rotating this a little bit, so that we're basically sort of like, I'm just gonna show you in a second. Yeah, so we're basically showing that the cave is continuing on somewhere, yeah, like that. And so there is some gap in the middle. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna be extending the floor. I'm just gonna be moving the floor a little back, and then I'm gonna be extending it in the x and the y axes, something like that. I think that should be good. Perfect. So now now our basic outline is done. It was pretty simple, wasn't it? Now we're going to be starting with the assets. Now, whenever I'm starting a project, what I do first is that I simply go to Quixel, add pixel content, and just go to this Megascans window, and I just look for some assets, right, before even starting the project. So for this, what I did was I went to collections, environment, and natural environment. Now you can just select any of these. You can basically take an idea, you can take inspiration from these as well, what sort of vibe you want to give to the scene. And so for this, I think I chose, all right, so for this render, which I chose this Valley collection, and it's going to give you a lot of these good assets which you can use for this render, and it has that sort of fantasy vibe to it as well. So firstly, I'm going to download, actually I've already downloaded it. So you're going to download a ground material. So I'm just going to be adding that to the scene. Just add that once you've downloaded it. And you can use this broken stump as well. I originally did download this, but I didn't end up using it. So it's your choice if you want to add it or not. And then we're going to be adding this rock granite. I think I already do have this in my scene. And then we can add this granite rock, and then this granite rock as well. Yeah, I think that was those were the assets which I used. This again, I did download this, but I don't think I used it anywhere. Yeah, I think there is one log right there, but it's not that important, honestly. So it's your choice if you want to download this or not. And then this mossy rocky ground, just download that, and I think we're good to go. So we're using very less assets, and we're going to be randomizing them, and we're going to be placing them in such a way that they're not going to look that repeated, hopefully. But yeah, it's generally very good to use less assets from an efficiency standpoint. But obviously, if you want to say create a scene for a very high level project, for example, if you're creating a game, if you're creating a very high level let's say a short film or something like that, then I would recommend you to use as many assets as you can, because that's going to create true randomness, and it's going to be it's going to give you the better results. But from an efficiency standpoint, I would recommend you to use as less assets as you can, right? So what I'm going to do now is let me just start from actually let's just start from the wall, right? So for that, I'm going to be dragging in some rocks. I'm just going to close this for now. Where exactly were these assets? All right, so I'm going to be starting with these granite rocks. So I'm just going to be placing one right here. And I'm going to be scaling it up quite a bit because it's very small. Something like that. And then we can probably add the other one as well. I would recommend you to add all the assets first and then start to arrange them properly, because then you have all you basically have your whole all of your tools available in front of you, right? So then you have the ultimate level of creativity. I think that should be fine. Now I might be making something a little different from this reference right here, but obviously it's up to you. It's your choice. If you want to make exactly this, then you can do that. In this render, I think these rocks were a little larger, but this time I'm going with a little smaller, like slightly less scaled rocks, but I am still gonna scale them up quite a bit. I think something like that should be good. Let me just turn off the snapping so that I can freely place them wherever I want. I think something like that should be good. Let me just rotate them slightly. Again, I'm just going to be turning off all the snapping, because that just takes away freedom from you in many cases. I think something like that should be good. Make sure that these rocks are blending in together very well. And even if they're not, I'm going to be showing you a way to actually hide that. And that is by using foliage, like I did here. These rocks were not blending in very well, so I used foliage to hide that. And let me just use something else. I think we downloaded this one as well, so we can probably add that right there. Obviously, we're going to be scaling it up. Something like that should be good. Again, this one as well. So you can see all these rocks are from the same collection. That's why they blend in together very well. And I would recommend you to always use assets from the same collection, because obviously they're made to be used together, so that those are going to give you the best results. Now I'm going to be duplicating these, and I'm going to be taking them to the other side. Probably like move it somewhere like that. And now I can just start to rotate and place the individual assets. Actually, I think this is supposed to be on the ground, so I'm not going to use that. I can use these instead, probably like that. Something like that should be good. I'm just going to be scaling this up quite a bit. And I think we have the entrance of our cave ready. It looks pretty good, although it does need a lot of work, to be honest, which is something we're going to be doing later on. I think that should be the basic shape of our cave. I think it looks pretty good, and the rocks are blending in together very well as well. Right. So I can probably rotate this a little bit. Alright, so I'm just going to continue working on this. So obviously all this comes down to personal preference, and I would recommend you to use your own layout, as I say in all my videos, instead of copying mine, because that's going to exercise your creative muscle, and it's going to be very beneficial for you in the long run. But sometimes honestly it is good to copy other people's work, because that's gonna build your own creative instincts, right? But in projects like these, I would recommend you to at least change the layout. If you're using these same assets, and if you're making a similar scene, then at least change the assets, change the layout of the assets, and just come up with your own unique assets, like style. And apart from that, obviously you have Pinterest with you. You can copy work from there as well. That's gonna be very helpful for you, because obviously on Pinterest, the work is made by really good professionals, and they put a lot of time and effort in their work. So if you just copy their layout, then that's going to build your own creative instinct. Obviously, don't copy or don't copy when you're doing commercial work. That is copyright infringement, and that is illegal. But when you're doing practice work, then feel free to copy other people's work. Right. So I think we are the entrance of the cave is basically done, and I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? I think something like that should be good. Yeah, perfect. The only problem is that this ends right here, right? So I'm gonna have to probably add some rocks underneath it. I'm gonna be adding these rocks right here. Okay, so this is open from the bottom as well, so I'm gonna have to rotate this. Something like that. And then I can just move it up. All right. And same exact thing with this as well. Let me just duplicate this one more time and add it right there. Now right now you're going to be noticing is that something which you're going to be noticing is that these two rocks look very similar. They look repeated because there's one line right here and there's one line right here, and this texture is also the same. So to prevent that, I'm just going to be rotating this, and that's something which which I've been telling you from a really long time, that you should make sure to rotate assets and try to make them unique. Yeah, that's really helpful. All right, so I think the top part is done. We're probably going to be placing our camera somewhere here, so anything above that is not going to be visible anyway. So we're not going to bother working on that. And so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be working on the floor, the ground. So for the ground, we can probably import this one, this model right here. So I'm going to be importing all the models first, and then we're going to be arranging them properly. I think that should be good. And apart from that, I think we had another one. Yeah, this one right here. This is really good. Okay. So I think these two assets should be enough, but if we can find anything else which we downloaded, then that's going to be helpful as well. Yeah, no, I think we only had these two. Right, so these two are more than enough. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be scaling this up, something like that. Just moving it down. And we can probably start from the inside, something like that. Right, so I'm going to be duplicating this. Oops, my bad. By the way, just save your project, press save all, and press Ctrl S as well, because I don't want you to lose all the progress that you've made so far, if you're following along, of course. And then I'm going to be selecting both of these, and I'm going to be moving them forward, something like that. Again, rotate them. and move them ahead. Something like that should be good. And now I think we should add one of these right there. I'm going to be flushing this inside the ground a little bit so that it blends in together. And then I'm going to be duplicating this one. Yeah, so I think it looks pretty good. Again, this looks repeated, so I'm going to be rotating this. Let me just move it down a little bit. Something like that. Yeah, so I think it looks pretty seamless and it looks really good. All right, so now we can just simply just select some of these and then we can just duplicate them. Because the ground is going to be covered by foliage anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much. We should instead spend more of our time on the lighting and the text, the lighting and basically the lighting and the animation, because that's going to make a bigger difference than this. I don't think we should waste too much time on the ground because that's going to be covered by. It's mostly going to be covered by foliage anyway, so yeah. Unless of course you're working on a professional project, then you should definitely take all the time which you need. Rotate it again, and yeah, perfect. So now we can just again duplicate some of these like that, and I don't think we need to rotate it even. I think it's fine just the way it is. All right, cool. So I think we are good to go. Maybe we should just extend this a little bit. So obviously the ground texture is not blending in perfectly. Some of it is sticking out, some of it is looking a little out of place, but it's going to be covered by foliage, so don't worry about that. But I think it is mostly seamless as well. It looks pretty good. So yeah, let me just duplicate one of these right there and rotate it. And one last right there as well. All right, so I think we are done with the basic, sort of the basic outline of our cave. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be firstly setting up my camera, after which we're going to be working on the foliage, and then we're going to be working on the lighting and everything. Actually, first let me just get done with the lighting, and then we're going to be working on the foliage. So firstly, let me just go ahead and go to cinematic and create a cine camera actor. I'm just going to right click this and pilot, and I'm going to be bringing it back. I'm going to be moving it up. Right, so I'm just going to be placing it right there. So the dimensions, again, I'm going to set it to 20 by 20 millimeters, the sensor height and sensor width. The focus, I'm going to disable this so that basically nothing is out of focus. You can obviously make some things in focus and something out of focus if you want, but I think in this render as well, everything was basically in focus, so that seems to be good. And apart from that, the focal length, I'm going to set it to 20 because we want to give some depth to this. And one thing which I'm noticing is that in this one, basically the cave is more, the cave is bigger, and in this one, the cave is a little smaller. So I'm going to be moving these up a little bit, something like that, and move this up as well. Just move these around, and it's obviously personal preference. Nothing is wrong in this. It's all just personal preference. Okay, just save your project, and let's start with the lighting. So what I'm going to do is that firstly, I'm going to add a post-process volume, add visual effects, post-process volume. I'm just going to be moving it down so that it doesn't disturb us. Let's search infinite extent, and I'm just going to check that. And let's firstly set the exposure correctly because it's very overexposed right now. So the exposure, I'm going to set it to manual exposure. Compensation, let's try 10. I think 10 should be good. How about 9? 9 is underexposed. 10 seems to be good. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to be going down to... Actually, let me just, before doing that, let me just make our scene a little more organized. So right now you're going to see that all these cubes and these assets are basically just out there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting all the cubes. I'm going to be pressing this button right here. And I'm just going to be naming this folder structure, because this is the basic structure of our scene, right? And now I'm going to be selecting all of these, bring them to a new folder, assets, and then I'm going to be selecting all of these and I'm going to be dragging them inside of this as well. Right, so our scene now is very organized and it's decluttered. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go to the skylight and let me just turn on real-time capture, because that's just going to make our scene look more realistic and make sure it's movable. All right, apart from that, let me just add, let me tweak the direction light a little bit because it's just straight on. It's very distracting. I think something like that should be good. So in the original scene, what I did was I basically had the light act from somewhere there, and it looked pretty good. So in this scene, I'm going to do the same exact thing. But again, it's personal preference, so you can do whatever you want. I think something like that should be good. All right. So I think that lighting seems to be good. One thing which I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be actually we're going to be tweaking the contrast and everything later on once we're done with this. But right now I think I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? One thing which I'm noticing is that this part is a little too bright. So we can probably tweak the lighting a little more. If you want a sort of a sunset look, you can do that as well. Or if say you want an overcast look, you can do that as well by using the sky atmosphere. So if you just go to the sky atmosphere and if you just go to this atmosphere my option, if you increase this, you're going to see that it's going to become more of an overcast day. So I'm going to be adding that a little bit to this scene as well. In the original scene, it was just mainly just sunlit, but in this one, I'm going to be making it a little overcast as well. So if I just get out of my direction light, I want to show you how this actually works and what it does. All right, so I don't know where I am. Oops. All right, so if I just get out of my camera, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be stop piloting this. And now I'm going to show you how it actually works. Basically, if you look at the sun, you're going to see that there is no sun visible. I think the sun is right there. So if I just go to the sky atmosphere and if I reduce this scattering, my scattering scale, you're going to see that the sun is more concentrated. But if I increase this, you're going to see it's going to become more blurred, and it's going to become it's basically going to act like an overcast day, right? More clouds are going to come in front of the sky, in front of the sun, right? So if I just go and tweak this, obviously we can tweak this later on, and we probably will, but I think something like that should be fine for now. All right, so I'm just going to be tweaking the sun a little bit, something like that maybe. Something like that should be good. Yeah. All right, so that's going to be our frame. And I think now we should move on to the next step, which is going to be to add the foliage. And so for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be, I'm just going to close these. And let me just get out of my camera. Actually, I'm just going to do it inside the camera. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to go to the foliage menu. And you're going to see there is no foliage right here. And that's because we have to import it. So I'm just going to go to add pixel content. And we can just search for, actually, we can just go inside that collection. Environment, natural, and if I just go down to this valley collection, you're going to see that we have actually we don't have any plants in this. All right, so now it's up to you which plants you want to use, but I found that in this one I used, I think they were called blackberry. I'm just going to search blackberry, but you can obviously use any plants which you want. So yeah, so this one right here, I'm just going to be adding them to the scene, but you can obviously go to this home right here, and you can go to 3D plants and you can just choose any of these plants, but I found that blackberry looked great in these, so I just used them. And I'm just going to be selecting all of these, so I just selected the first one, pressed shift on my keyboard, and I just dragged it right here. And now you're going to see that if I just reduce the brush size because it's way too large right now, and if I just paint them, you're going to see that it's way too big. The scale is way too large. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting all of these. Let me check all of them. I'm just going to be tweaking the scale. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be setting the minimum scale to 0.1 and the maximum to 0.3. I think that should be good. Yeah, that's a nice scale. We can probably reduce it to 0.2. Yeah, I think that's more like it. All right, so I'm just going to start to paint the foliage right here to cover the ground. Now, obviously, in some cases, you want this to lead somewhere, and you want to like strategically place the foliage wherever you want to guide the viewer's eye. But here our main purpose is just to cover up the ground, so we're not going to be worrying about that. I think we're done with this. And that looks pretty good, doesn't it? If you think that this is a little too bright and it looks a little too fake, then I would recommend you to actually come here and go inside this color overlay and reduce this like that. So I think that looks more realistic. If I just go to the original render, you're going to see that it's a little darker. Right, and I think that should be good enough. And do the same exact thing with this other material as well. So I'm just going to be reducing it a little bit. So this other material is actually the billboard material, and what the billboard material means, by the way, just save your project, is that whenever you move far away, you're going to see that these materials are going to be switched. The mesh is going to be switched, and it's going to add another material to this. So if you want to prevent that from happening, if you want to use the high quality mesh for all distances, what you can do is you can simply come down here to this console command menu and just search foliage dot force LOD. If I just select this, force LOD space 0. Now what this is going to do is that it's going to be forcing all of the meshes to use the high quality mesh, even if you go far away. And if say you want to do this with other objects, for example, if I just move away, you're going to see that eventually these rocks are also going to become low quality. You're going to see these rocks are starting to become low quality. But obviously, if you want to prevent that, it is going to come with a huge performance cost. But still, if you want to prevent that, you can just simply press r.force LOD space 0. So r.force LOD is basically the same as foliage.force LOD, but for other objects than foliage. So I'm just going to use that command as well. Now these two commands are going to come with a huge performance cost. So just use them if they're absolutely necessary. Otherwise, I would not recommend you to use them. All right, so now if I just go to my original render, and one thing which I like about this is that this has a lot of harsh shadows, and I actually do like the sunlight. So I'm just going to get rid of that overcast effect which we added earlier. So I'm just going to be setting the my scattering scale to 0, back to 0, and now we can just adjust our directional light according to what we want. Something like that should be good. And we can probably one thing which we can do is that we can actually select these rocks, and we can like darken the material of these rocks, right? So I'm just gonna select that rock first, and then we can come to the material of this rock, double click that, and then we have this option of albedo tint, and we can just darken this, and it's gonna darken the ground for us. Oops, not that. Something like that should be good. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. And apart from that, another thing which I'm going to do is that I'm going to be reducing the brightness of these rocks as well. So I'm just going to select the material and albedo tint, make it a little darker, something like that. So some rocks are going to be brighter, some are going to be darker, and you have to add randomness, and you have to add basically nothing in nature is perfect, right? Everything is just random. So you have to add that randomness to this. All right, one thing which I'm going to do is that I'm probably going to be tweaking these because I don't think they look really good. I think that's a better option. Let me move this ahead. Yeah, I think that's going to be that I think is good. All right, so next up what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be let's work on the post-processing now, because I think this looks a little better. It has more vibrance, it has better contrast, so we're going to be making this look a little more like that as well. But obviously, no two renders can be exactly the same. We're not trying to achieve the exact same results. My job here is to just to show you how to do the exact thing, and exactly what to do and what to make. That is up to you, and that's your job. So I would recommend you to just play around with this and just use your own creativity to make this. So yeah, right. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be setting the exposure to 9.6. Actually, I'm just going to make it 10 because anything below that is a little underexposed. We are going to be adding a little bit of chromatic aberration, so just 0.1. I think that should be good. It just adds that extra bit of realism, and I think that's pretty good. Lens flares, I don't think we need them. Apart from that, depth of field, nothing, not as important. Contrast, I am going to be increasing the contrast to something like 1.2. 1.1 should be enough, I think. Yeah, 1.1 is good. And the saturation, we can probably try reducing this a little bit, 0.95, something like that, because obviously nature is not that saturated. If you just go and look at nature, everything in movies, if for example you've seen movies which are very realistic, they're not very saturated. So in order to make things look more realistic, you have to reduce the saturation most of the time. And I'm trying to make sure that if my ray tracing is turned on, so if you have ray tracing, then be sure to turn it on, because that's going to give you slightly better results, although it's not going to make that big of a difference, but it is going to make a slight difference. And apart from that, let me just search ray and the ray lighting mode. I'm gonna set it to hit lighting for reflections, although we don't have anything which is reflective here, so it won't make that big of a difference. And apart from that, I think ray trace shadows, let's just enable that. We're not noticing any major difference. However, it might um it might add some subtle effects. Apart from that, yeah, I think we're basically done. And one thing which I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be making the inside of this cave, and let's actually add some fog as well. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to exponential height fog, and I'm going to be going down to this volumetric fog option. And if I turn it on, you're going to see nothing is going to happen as such. But if I turn up the fog density, you're going to see that we're going to see some fog inside of that right there. So one thing which I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be tweaking the color of this volumetric fog. So I'm just going to go to this albedo, and I'm going to be setting it to a little something like yellowish, something like that. Perfect. So I think that should be good.